Time to begin our Bible study. We're in chapter 18 in the book of Genesis, and we left off at about verse 3. Genesis 18:3. Before we begin, let's bow our heads in a word of opening prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for another Lord's Day, for another opportunity to come together and study from your word. We ask your blessings on us as we study from it, that we might glean from it those things we stand in need of, that we might be better fitted for service for you here below. We're so thankful that we're able to do so. We're able to come together to worship you in spirit and in truth. And we live in a nation where, at least thus far, we have not been hindered in any way to do so by the governing authorities or by those around us. We hope and pray that such a situation will continue for many, many years to come. We ask that you will bless us as we go throughout the remainder of this day and the services that we have planned, and that our worship may be acceptable in your sight. We ask that you will bless those who are sick of our number and unable to be out with us. And if it be your will, place your healing hand upon them all and restore them to a portion of health that they need and desire. We ask that you'll bless those who are in the hospitals, those with upcoming surgeries, those recuperating from surgeries. We ask that you'll bless those who are undergoing extensive treatments and that the desired outcome will be achieved. Forgive us of our wrongs and bless us as we go throughout our lives, as we know you have in the past and will continue to do so in the future. We acknowledge that every good and perfect gift comes from you. But we're especially thankful for the gift of your only begotten Son, who died on the cross that our sins might be forgiven, that we might have redemption and the hope of eternal life. We ask all of these favors and blessings in his name, and amen. Okay, we began chapter 18. The three visitors come to Abraham in the plains of Mamre, or oaks of Mamre, depending on the translation you're reading. Some believe that oaks of Mamre might be a little more accurate translation. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think it makes a lot of difference, but unless you're in the Bible Bowl and you're using the ESV, you want to say oaks of Mamre instead of plains of Mamre. But Abraham sitting in the door of his tent in the heat of the day, and we discussed that. That's probably a good place to be sitting, where you're in the shade, a little bit in the shade, and not out under the hot sun. And he lifts up his eyes. He sees three men approaching his position, and he runs out to meet them. He bows himself down to the ground. And then verse 3, he says, "And said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant." This is what we refer to, and Dehoff refers to here as primitive hospitality, a delightful display of primitive hospitality. Very necessary back in those days. Okay? You just didn't have service stations or McDonald's or anything like that to refresh yourself along the way on your journey. There just wasn't much in between the towns. Roads, they connected the towns together, but you were going from one place to the other. Traveling was slow and arduous, very difficult many times, maybe fraught with danger. And so when you came across a person along the way, it was generally an accepted behavior and the norm for people to extend hospitality in such a way. And here, this is what Abraham is doing. Now, when he refers to the leader of these men, one he perceives to be the leader, as my Lord, here the word that is being used does not necessarily imply deity. It is the word Adonai, which is also used to refer to God. But it is really the equivalent of saying sir in our language. Okay? It would be the same as greeting somebody with respect, saying, "Sir, would you mind staying here for just a while, and we'll take care of some of your needs," is what Abraham is basically saying. So the word Lord here does not yet at least indicate deity. But there are words that do indicate deity, and as we're going to see as we move further on into this story, it's going to become apparent that these are not mere men, we're going to find out. They appear as men. Two of them are going to turn out to be angels, and one is actually going to turn out to be the Lord. Okay, the physical manifestation of the Lord probably would be safe enough to conclude this is the angel of the Lord, the angel of Jehovah, as we're going to see in just a little bit. But at least right now it appears that Abraham doesn't really know exactly who they are. It's not yet quite clear who they are. And so he goes on in verse 4 to say, "Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree." Okay, so again, this is in the heat of the day, so rest under the tree, that sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? Why Abraham's in the opening of his tent is because probably in the heat of the day, it's very hot, trying to get out of the scorching sun. He says, if you rest here under the tree, we'll get a little water. We'll fetch some water so you can wash your feet. Remember, whenever you traveled somewhere, you might have rode on a donkey, on a beast of burden, but more often than not, you were going to be walking. And walking, they didn't have Nikes or New Balance like we have today. It's a little easier on your feet. It's basically just a leather sandal with straps around it. Your feet would get hot, dirty, scuffed up, sore. There's no arch support in that kind of a shoe or that arrangement, sandals and the like. And so what a refreshing thing it would be to be able to put your feet into water and wash them, get the dirt off of them, and to clean any cuts or bruises and scrapes on them. And just the feel, the feel of the water, cool water on your feet, would be a soothing relief from the day's walk, especially after a long, hard journey in such a situation. But Abraham's not going to be done there, not just fetching a little water for them to drink and to wash their feet with. He says, "And I will fetch a morsel of bread and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on. Therefore are ye come unto your servants." Now, this is the reason you're here. You came here and here I am. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to take care of your needs. And they said, "So do as thou hast said." So they were in agreement with it, weren't they? Probably a wise thing in that kind of a situation. And Abraham hastened to the tent unto Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth." So very quickly, Abraham goes in and starts delegating. He's got some things to organize to take care of these men's needs. And so he goes into Sarah and he says to measure out 3 measures of meal or 3 seahs of meal in the English Standard Version, it says. I'm not sure what they'll accept. If I don't know if anyone's here, probably not in the Bible Bowl, but if you are, the word that they will want would be seah, if it has any reference to that, instead of measures. But if you look up the word seah, it's going to say a measure. So one's as good as the other as far as I'm concerned. We don't know exactly how big they were, but the common measure of meal that would be used to make a cake of bread. And obviously there are 3. He wants to make 3 so that he has enough for each of his guests. Okay, and Abraham ran to the herd. Now, it's not that Abraham's delegating all this responsibility and he's doing nothing. He's going to rush and very quickly take care of the things that need to be done. So he doesn't just walk, he's making haste, running to the, and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man. And he hasted to dress it. So he gives a young calf to a young man and says, "Okay, take care of this." So they're going to butcher that and get it ready to feed the men. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. Again, hospitality. It wasn't that you would sit down and eat with them, but you actually prepared that as if you were the servants, and you prepared it for them and let them eat first. And so that's what takes place. You can imagine how refreshing that would be to men. Although we do know that these were not just men, were they? We know that from after reading the story that you're going to find out there's much more to them than just human beings on a walk or on a journey somewhere. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah, thy wife? And he said, Behold, she's over here in the tent. And when he says, Behold, he probably gestured toward the tent. You can see there she is in the tent. All right, so Sarah's staying in the tent, which would be probably appropriate. Rather than to come out, she would be within the tent. And while these strangers come through, she baked the bread for them and the cakes of bread so that they'd have something to refresh themselves with. And so they ask him by name, Where is Sarah, thy wife? How did they know Sarah's name? Well, obviously, these people know a little bit more than what normal people would. It's possible that they had heard about Abraham and Sarah. It could have been if they were just mere human travelers, they might have heard of Abraham by reputation, knew that Abraham dwelled in this area, and he could be depended upon. But again, these men were more than just mere men, so they knew more about Abraham and Sarah than just normal human beings would know. Okay? And he, whoever that he is, and we're going to find out who it is here in a little bit, he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah, thy wife, shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Okay, who is this that's talking? I will return unto you the Lord. Okay, not just capital, not just a small L-O-R-D or capital L and small O-R-D. If you look down in verse 13, you're going to find all capitals, referring to this same individual who does all the talking here. So who is that? Jehovah God. Okay, so this is a manifestation of God himself in this man. Now, if you have a man in the flesh who manifests God, who would that be? That would be Jesus himself, wouldn't it? Because it's the living Word who was made flesh and dwelt among us. This is what we refer to, many passages refer to him as the angel of Jehovah or the angel of the Lord or the pre-incarnate Christ. Before he becomes flesh in the traditional sense, being born of a woman, this is a manifestation of the Son of God before he becomes the Son of God. But this is the second person in the Trinity. So he is there referring to him. And Jesus, of course, is a partaker of the same divine essence, which is God, Jehovah. Okay? And that's why the word Jehovah appears in verse 13. This is the same person who's doing the talking here in verse 10. Now, he says it'll be in accordance to the time of life. What is according to the time of life? 9 months. Okay, that's the gestation. So he says, I'm going to return to you about this time, according to the time of life. And Sarah's going to have a son. Now, how old is Abraham at this point? He's maybe a little better than 99, okay? And Sarah is 89, all right? We just seen, yeah, I know. Yeah, that's hilarious, isn't it? Okay, 89 years old Sarah is, and she's going to be 90 when she gives birth to Isaac. All right, it is hilarious. To us it is. But with God, nothing's impossible. All right, we know that this occurs after the circumcision in the preceding chapter. God makes that covenant with Abraham. Abraham's 99 years old when he becomes circumcised. How old is Ishmael? He's 13 years old. All right, he's 13 years old. He's going to be 14 when Isaac is born. Abraham's going to be 100, and Sarah's going to be 90. Just to put that all into perspective here, in the matter of the time and how things are turning out here. And this is 25 years after the original promise that I'm going to give you a son. So when God promises something, you can be sure of it, but you got to wait. All right? Wait until God, again, we are on his schedule, not the other way around. God's not on ours. We think it ought to be done now, now, now. That's not the way God looks at it. He has a plan in mind. We have to trust him on it. And whether or not we can see the wisdom in all that, again, it'd be awful difficult for Abraham. Remember in the preceding chapter, we saw how Abraham said, when God said, I'm going to bless you, Abraham, I'm going to bless you. And how many times has he said this? I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to do all this. And Abraham falls on his face before the Lord, not disrespectfully. I kind of imagine Abraham, if he'd have said it in our day, with all due respect, God, I still don't have my son that you promised me. How's this going to happen? You promised me a son, and now that son being a great nation. You're still telling me this, but I still don't have this son, and the clock's ticking. We're getting old. With all due respect, I don't think he was being disrespectful at all. He just is so confused by this. He's tried to help God out with Eliezer, his servant. Well, maybe I'll make him my heir. No, it's going to be someone that's your own flesh and blood, Abraham, that come from within you. Okay, how about Ishmael? Oh, that Ishmael may live before you. I've heard you about Ishmael. He's your seed too, so I'll make him into a nation as well. But that's not the one I'm talking about. This one's going to come through Sarah. This was going to be Isaac. Okay. Now remember in the preceding chapter when God says this, what does Abraham do? He laughs. Abraham laughs. We kind of give Sarah a bad rap here because she laughed. Abraham laughed too. Abraham laughed too. And now Sarah hears this is going to happen. She's in the door of the tent and she's listening, and he says, I'm going to return to you during the time of life, 9 months, the gestation. And this time next year, you're going to have a son. Sarah's going to give birth to a son. And notice what happens. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. We don't have to go into detail on that. Let's just say Sarah couldn't have kids anymore. You understand what that means, right? When you get to a certain point, that's just not possible anymore. That baby factory just doesn't work. It's closed, right? Doesn't work anymore. That's the way it's just simply a part of life. That's the way it works. That's nature. All right, so therefore, verse 12, Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? So she laughed within herself. Both Abraham and Sarah laughed. Okay. Now, also, it's of note to say that she refers to Abraham as her Lord. Now, it's capital. Is that capital L-O-R-D? No, it's just small. All right. She's showing reverence, showing respect for her husband, which is acceptable in God's sight. But that's Old Testament, right? That doesn't work in the New Testament, ladies? How about if I were to tell you in the New Testament, an apostle refers to this incident and says, you Christian ladies need to be just like her. 1 Peter 3, verse 6. Sarah calls Abraham Lord, and you're her daughters if you do the same without any amazement. As Christians, you are to be the same way. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be walking around, okay, I got to call him Lord. All right. You know what it means. It's the idea of submitting to your husband. That's acceptable and pleasing in the sight of God. Number one, men or women, who do we want to please? You want to please God? This is his will. Okay. Husbands, you need to take the charge. You be the head of the house, just as God said to do it. Not a tyrant, but you be in charge like God wanted you to. Wives, submit yourselves to the husband as unto the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife. You see, all of that ties together. This is God's will. You want to please God? Let's do it his way. Okay? Let's do it his way. Oh, I might tease Tina once in a while and say, do you know what you're supposed to call me? No, not really. The idea is the submission. Okay? Sarah called Abraham Lord. And we need to follow her example here. The ladies ought to do that with their husbands, just like Sarah did. That was pleasing to God, and it'll be pleasing today as well. Just a little side note there. Look at 1 Peter 3:6. You don't have to take my word for it. See what the Apostle Peter said. Now look at verse 13. And the Lord, circle that word, all capitals, said unto Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Who's speaking? Jehovah. Oh, this isn't just a man, is it? It's a manifestation of Jehovah. Yeah, he appears to be human, and God can do that, can't he? How about angels? He can make them his ministers flames of fire if he wants to. His angels can be made into any shape, form he wants them to be. So they appear as men too. There are two men with him, and the Lord, capital L-O-R-D, all caps, he's the guy in charge. All right? So we know who this is now. Does Abraham know? I think he's getting an inkling here, but Moses surely knows when he's writing it down. Moses knows who it is. Look at verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord, for Jehovah? Okay, same lettering. At the time appointed, I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Now, I can understand why the Lord would have been patient with Abraham here, especially after 25 years of promising him this. And he just doesn't believe, how in the world can this happen? I'm an old man, and Sarah's an old woman now. You know, that's no disrespect. That's just the facts. We're just beyond childbearing, child-rearing years. But God says, I will surely return to you. I will surely return according to the time of life. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, nay, but thou didst laugh. Can't hide anything from God, can you? Okay, she denied it. Oh, no, I didn't laugh. Now, maybe she meant, I didn't laugh out loud, but she laughed within herself, didn't she? She laughed within herself. Because, that's hilarious, right? That's what we just discussed. That's hilarious. 90-year-old woman giving birth to a son, hilarious. So she does laugh within herself, and God quickly corrects her and says, no, you did laugh. You certainly did laugh. And I'm going to prove something to you, girl. I'm going to prove this to you. I don't care whether you're 90 years old or not. You're a girl to me. That's what Jehovah's saying. I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to return during the time of life, and you're going to have a son. Now, isn't it interesting that both Abraham and Sarah laugh at this promise? And when Isaac is born, he's named Isaac, which means what? Laughter. Okay. Maybe a reminder to Abraham and Sarah what it means to laugh at God's promises, but also something else too. As Sarah's going to say later on, we're going to see God has caused me to laugh. Now they're laughing for a different reason. And then everyone who hears about me are going to laugh with me. They're laughing for joy now, you see. So God knows how to do things. He did it exactly the way he intended to do it. Gene? Why didn't they? It just simply says Sarah was barren. She just couldn't bear children. Why? I don't know. We read about Abimelech. That's going to come up. We've read about Abimelech when he takes Sarah, because Sarah's a beautiful woman, even though she's getting up in years by this time. But he takes her because she says that she's the sister of Abraham, not his wife, and he takes her to be a wife. And you remember how that all comes about, how it turns out. But it says that God had caused the wombs, all of the wombs of Abimelech's people to be closed. There was nobody bearing any children. All right, he had closed all the wombs. So that suggests to us that God has more of a part in this, at least at this time, than just natural things. So it could have been that God caused Sarah to be barren all these years, because it was going to be a special birth that she's going to give. Now, it doesn't seem fair, it doesn't seem right to us, but again, God has his reasons. We have to trust him. Yeah, it's a good thing to wonder about. I don't know if what we have all the answers to it, but it's very, very likely that God didn't allow Sarah to have children because she was going to have the one, and that's the one that's going to be important. Not going to be anybody else in line with it. Okay? And the men rose up from thence and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. So not only was it customary with primitive hospitality to greet them, to run out, greet them, to bow yourself to the ground, feed them, wash their feet, or give them the water at least to wash their feet and refresh themselves. But it was also customary after they'd eaten and rested to see them on their way. So Abraham goes with them on the direction of their journey, and they journeyed towards Sodom. Okay, so we know what's coming up here. And the Lord said, and again, capitals, all capitals, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? Again, there's that renewal of the promise again. Shall I hide this thing I'm about to do? There's something terrible that's about to happen. It's kind of interesting to see this. We already looked at the fact that the children of Israel are going to dwell for 400 years in Egypt as slaves. Why? The purpose is given. It's chapter 16, I believe it is. But you remember, the wickedness of the Amorites is not yet full. That's why they have to dwell for 400 years. Now, that doesn't seem fair to you and me, all right? But there are still some good Amorites left in Canaan. There are even some good Philistines left, which I believe Abimelech is kind of among the Philistines at least. He's a pretty good guy. But there are some good Amorites. As you remember when Abraham rescued Lot, there was Mamre, Eshcol, and Aner. 3 good Amorites that went along with Abraham, good friends of Abraham, allowed Abraham to dwell under the oaks or the plains of Mamre, which Mamre is not a place, Mamre is a person. Abraham dwelled in the plains or the oaks of Mamre, the land that belonged to Mamre, the Amorite. And this was a good man. He allowed Abraham to dwell there, and they became confederates with Abraham when he went against those 4 kings, Chedorlaomer and his bunch. Okay? So all of that being said, the idea of the wickedness of the Amorites is not yet full. God's going to give them another 400 years before they're destroyed under Joshua's leadership. The Israelites come and take over the land. Well, the wickedness of Sodom has apparently become full. The cup is running over now. And God's going to go down and see the wickedness of the city, and he's going to exercise judgment upon it. Okay? And we're going to get a good lesson here from this about how this is going to come about. Abraham's going to be a great nation, so God says, I'm not going to hide from you what I'm about to do. You've got the faith to be able to hear what I'm about to say. I'm going to lay it to you, give it to you straight. I'm going to lay it on the line for you so you can see. For I know him, talking about Abraham, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they will keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of it. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now to see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know. Again, a lot of anthropomorphism here, because God surely does know, doesn't he? But he's assuming the form of a man and behaving as a man so that a man can understand, so that you and I can understand. I'm going to go down, I'm going to see for myself if this is what's true. You know, like a man would say, I've heard that down in Sodom people are like this. Well, I'm going to go see that for myself. Well, that's what God's saying. God doesn't have to do that, but he's taking on human qualities here so that Abraham can understand it and be more relatable to him. And the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. So the 2 men went on down. They went on down to Sodom. Now, we're going to see them show up here pretty soon, aren't These two men turn out to be angels. And they have abilities that are beyond normal human males. You know, what men can do, all right? They're going to be able to do things that men are not able to do. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? There's some good people down there. Who does Abraham have in mind? Lot, okay? He knows where Lot is right now, all right? So Lot's saying, are you going to destroy the entire city? What about righteous people living there? Are you going to destroy the righteous along with the wicked? Peradventure, or just suppose, we would say, peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Knowing that God is righteous and just, he's not going to be able to do something like that. That's against his nature. You don't punish the righteous right alongside the wicked. All right. And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. So this is a city that's got hundreds, perhaps thousands and thousands of people. But if there are 50 righteous, I'll let it go. That might tell you something about the land of Canaan. The wickedness is not yet full. That means there are a few righteous left. And he says, I'm going to spare it. 400 years, Israel's going to have to be slaves in Egypt because they can't come and destroy these people now. Their wickedness is not yet full. Bob, you had something? He does, doesn't he? Right. Again, anthropomorphism. He's just simply relating to human as a human to a human. He's taking on the form of a man and being like a man, and then referring to Abraham in such a way, just like a man would. I'm going to go down and see if it's like they say. God, of course, already knows this, but as a human being, he'd have to say, you know, I've heard Sodom's this way. I'm going to go see for myself. All right. And that's what he's doing. He's taking on human characteristics to be more relatable to Abraham and to us as well, as we read about this. So he says, if there's 50 righteous, I won't destroy it for the 50 righteous sake. Does he know how many righteous are in the city right now? He sure does. He knows who's going to be saved. He knows exactly who's going to get out of the city. But he's telling this to Abraham, and this is another test for Abraham as well, isn't it? How many righteous does it take? Well, I'm going to make a suggestion to you when we get to the end of this, how many righteous it would have taken if Abraham would have gone just a little further. But notice what he says. Just a suggestion, though. So he says, Abraham answered and said, behold, now I have taken it upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Abraham knows who he's talking to now, doesn't he? I'm just dust and ashes, and I'm going to take it on myself to speak. Peradventure there lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for the lack of 5? And he said, if I will find there 40 and 5, I will not destroy it. We often kind of poke fun here at Abraham and saying, you know, he's the father of the Jews, and he's trying to Jew God down here a little bit, isn't he? What his people are known for, in a sense. Now, if someone says, "Oh, that's racist," and all that, no, it's just poking fun here. But you see what's happening here. Abraham is kind of seeing how far he can go. Just how far is it God will be patient with me asking these things? Notice the patience of Jehovah God here. Notice how patient he is with Abraham. Does he get angry with him? I'm going to go down and destroy Sodom. Well, would you destroy it if there's 50 righteous? No, I won't destroy it. I'll spare it. For your sake and for the 50 righteous, I'll spare it. How about 45? Well, I'll spare it for 45. You see, God's not getting angry here. And Abraham's very respectful. And notice what he says. I'm just dust and ashes. And he spake unto him yet again and said, peradventure there be 40 found there. He said, I will not do it for 40's sake. Again, no anger. There's no anger here. God's not getting upset with Abraham. And he said unto him, oh, let not the Lord be angry. See, I mean, it's something to expect. If you're going to question God and his motives of what he's doing, it's to be expected. You might upset him. You might make him angry. He says, I'm going to speak to you again. Don't be angry. Peradventure there shall be 30 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 30's sake. No anger. No disappointment. There's no reprimand here. God just says simply, I won't do it for 30's sake. You also see what Abraham's doing here in his mind. You suppose he's kind of taking inventory up here? Let's see, there's Lot's wife, his daughters. He's trying to count up how many there may be. All right, maybe alongside Lot, there's a good man over here and a good man over here. So maybe there's so many righteous here, I can get the city saved. And he's interceding on behalf of the city of Sodom here, trying to keep it from being destroyed. So, even what's going on in Sodom, as wicked as it is, Abraham's still trying to plead on their behalf to try, because it's humanity, isn't it? He doesn't want to see them destroyed. We are a little bit the same way today. Do we want to see those of especially Sodom's persuasion today? We want to see them hurt or destroyed? Of course not. Of course not. So we warn them. We try to be as kind as we can be, but we have to warn them what the Word of God says. Can you go to heaven and be that way? Not according to the Scriptures. That's something displeasing. That's an abomination to the Lord. So we have to point that out. We have to point that out. Lovingly, caringly, but we still have to point it out. We can get called all kinds of names, and that's fine. Call me whatever you want to call me. Don't call me late for supper, but, But the rest of it, we'll take it. We will take it. Whatever name you want to call. But we have to do that. We have to point that out. We don't want to see them destroyed. We don't want to see them hurt. Abraham didn't either. So he keeps speaking on their behalf. He said, peradventure there be 20 found there. Again, verse 31. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this one. So here it is. Abraham said, I'm not going to go any further than this. Here's my bottom line. And what he says, peradventure 10 shall be found there. We'll see him kind of covering up. What if there's only 10 found there? What does God say? I will not destroy it for 10's sake. How far could Abraham have gone? He could have gone down to 1 maybe. Just a suggestion. Just a suggestion. How do I know that? What if there's one righteous person in Sodom? Really, truly righteous person. And there is. Okay. Here's an idea. Suppose you have 100 sheep and you lose one. Well, he's gone. I can't leave the 99 because, what are we going to do about the 99 in the fold up here when there's one that's out here astray? What did Jesus say? I'm going to leave the 99 in the fold and go out after that one sheep that's lost. Just a suggestion. And I don't know for sure how far Abraham could have gone before the Lord did get angry with him, but I'd like to suggest maybe even if he'd have gone down to 1. I don't think he would have either, because Abraham's being very respectful here. Now, there are times when God says that's enough, even with Moses. Moses was good too, and before God. But remember, he kept asking, Lord, I want to go in. I want to cross over the Jordan River. I've been 40 years with these people. I want to cross over and see the great land. And what does God tell him? He said, no, and don't ask again. It's not going to happen. It's modern day vernacular, but you get the point. Don't ask me again. I've made up my mind. Okay? So the Lord can get angry. He can get angry. But he doesn't show any anger here at all toward Abraham. And maybe he could have gone down to even 1 righteous, but he stops here at 10. Okay? And the Lord went his way, and as soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. So they head toward the city of Sodom. Okay, that brings us to chapter 19. It seems like we're going a little quicker. I am trying to catch up with Mark a little bit in the next 3 weeks. I don't know how far we're going to go. We wanted to get through 25 by the time the Bible Bowl is upon us, and we're in crunch time right now. We got about 3 weeks, so we're going to need to try to finish it up here. I'd like to get through 25 by then. That's going to be difficult to do, but we'll see what we can do. Okay, in chapter 19, and there came 2 angels to Sodom at evening. In the evening, the 2 men, where did these 2 angels came to Lot in Sodom, where did they come from? These 2 men that were with Abraham, they headed towards Sodom. And the Lord doesn't show up here. At least he doesn't in person show up, but he's there, isn't he? That should tell us something as well. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. Had a good teacher, didn't he? He was with Abraham for a lot of years. All right. Does the same thing Abraham does. He sees the 2 men coming. He bows himself to the ground. Again, that primitive Middle Eastern hospitality. And he said, "Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night and wash your feet. And you shall rise up early and go on your ways." And they said, "Nay, but we will abide in the street all night." Remember, they had come to witness what's going on. They wanted to see it for themselves. So we're going to stay in the street all night. And Lot says, that's not a good idea, is it? Lot knows what kind of city he's living in. I don't know why Lot stays here. We read about him in the New Testament that his righteous soul was vexed with the wickedness that was all around him. Why did he even bother? Why did he stay? I don't understand that. I don't know why he did. But there he is. Now we also see Lot sitting in the gate of the city in the evening. Sitting at the gate, watching for people to come into the city. You get the impression that maybe he's looking after the welfare of people who would come to visit this city, knowing what it turns to when the sun goes down. Okay? Might very well be the case. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So he made a meal for them. It doesn't say anything about killing a calf or anything like Abraham did. And remember, Lot had great herds, so why didn't he do this? We don't know. It says he made cakes of bread, unleavened bread. We don't know. Maybe he doesn't have those herds anymore. Maybe he lost them all. We don't know. But here he is in Sodom, but he does provide a meal for them, and they come into his house. But before they lay down, it's time to, we're talking, we're eating, enjoying each other's company. It's getting late. They start stretching and yawning. Okay, it's time to turn in. But before this can happen, something else does. Before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. So it was every man, all the men of the city that came out. And they surrounded Lot's house. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came in to thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them. This is King James English, and it's euphemistically what they intend to do with these men is euphemistically implied in the word no. We're not go any farther than that. You understand what's being done here. These are men who are looking at other men in such a way, and they want them brought out to them so that they can have their way. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after them. He opens the door and comes out, and he closes the door behind him. In other words, to defend these men and not let them in. That's really, we think about Lot as being kind of a weakling, and sometimes when we read about him, some of the things that he says and does, not the best person. He's not on the caliber of Abraham, is he? But this is a pretty brave thing to do. To go out in front of the entire city. All of the men from every quarter have come, both old and young. And he goes out there to face them. All right. Now, what he says to them is not very commendable. All right, as we're going to see. All right. He said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Don't do this to these men. They're under my protection. Okay. Behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing. For therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. Now that's not a commendable thing to do, to offer your daughters, all right, to these debaucherous men. Okay, these are people who are wicked. And I can't imagine any man that would give his daughters to some crowd like this to have their way with them. It's also possible that Lot knew they wouldn't accept that offer because their minds were in another direction entirely. But even the thoughts of, well, what if one of them says, oh, okay, send them out. Now, I can't even imagine that. Daryl? It sure seems that way, doesn't it? Maybe. All right. We don't have any indication here that Lot knew who these men were yet. He just knows that they came under the shadow of his roof, and he's fed them, and he's obligated to see to their welfare. That's just the custom of that land. That's the way it's supposed to be, hospitality. And so he wants to protect them at any cost. Now, it's interesting what they say to him here. And they said, stand back. I'm not sure what this phrase actually means. Some people say it was just a phrase that they used sarcastically to say, oh, look at who he thinks he is, stand back, you know. And that may well be, or it may just simply be that they give him an order to get away from the door, get out of our way. That might be what it means as well. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. So as Lot's trying to keep them out, they're pressing this crowd back against the door to break the door, and Lot's caught in between. All right. So you can imagine that scene and the suffering that Lot's enduring now. He's being crushed by the weight of this crowd up against this door that has been closed. Now, verse 10 says this very matter-of-factly, but there is supernatural overtones to what's happening here in verse 10. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut the door. 2 men against the crowd of men, they opened the door, pull Lot in, and close the door. Remember, Lot's being pressed against the door so that the door is ready to break. How did they do this? They're not just men, are they? Lot might be getting some indication now, but these aren't just men, all right? They're able to do this, but that's not all they were able to do. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So not only did they pull Lot in, close the door against all the strength of that crowd, but they struck them blind. Now, I've read in some commentaries that this meant not that they were completely blind, that everything was just black, but their vision was blurred and they couldn't see clearly enough to know where they were. They maybe could see enough to get around, to grope around and try to find something, but they couldn't see any details. Now, I don't know if that's the case or not, but it says that they wearied themselves to find the door. I would think that if you saw this display, you would stop what you were trying to do. These men seem to be bent they're so lost, so depraved of mind, that they're going to continue doing this no matter what. Now, that's a sad state when a person is that wicked and that evil. They can't even see what's happened to them. Okay, we're out of time. We'll pick up there, Lord willing, on Wednesday evening.